everybody for coming. I would like to introduce David Rickless, student in the, I'll say the Department of Geography, since we're actually not a department by ourselves because we share it with others, but I like to think we're alone sometimes. David has been working on sort of the economic problems and the political problems from a geographic perspective that have been involved with HB 56, the immigration law that passed in 2011. And we're looking at it a little bit differently, at a different scale. David came to me and was interested in working on the project and thought maybe, since everything that we were finding was actually at the state level, that maybe a county level analysis would be a little bit more pertinent when we look at what actually goes on at the county level. And so with that, David.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I am David Rickless. I'm a sophomore in the geography department. And so I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank Dr. Morgan for working on this with me, or allowing me to work on it with him, whatever way you want to put it. So we're looking at unintended consequences of strict immigration laws, specifically Alabama's HB 56. HB 56 is the Beeson-Hammond Alabama Taxpayer and Citizen Protection Act. And it was signed into law by Governor Robert Bentley in June 2011. It was considered then, and still considered, the nation's strictest immigration law. So what was the purpose of this law specifically? Well, in the words of Mickey Hammond, one of the bill's co-authors, the law's goal was to attack every aspect of an illegal alien's life and make it difficult for them to live here so that they will deport themselves. Now, once the undocumented workers were out of the way, the theory is that more jobs would be open for non-immigrants. And businesses that pay legal wages wouldn't have to compete with those that hired undocumented workers under the table. And also, state and local governments would benefit because they wouldn't be providing services like education and health care to people that weren't paying taxes. Now, this argument makes a couple of big assumptions. One is that native Alabamians are actually competing for the same jobs as immigrants. And this may be the case sometimes, but anecdotal evidence at least shows that it isn't universally true. Another assumption is that undocumented immigrants are enjoying social services without paying back into the system. And the problem with that is that they do pay sales tax, for sure, on things that they buy, and many don't receive the tax benefits that they might be entitled to normally. Even without considering all that, most immigrants, documented or otherwise, are going to spend money on things like food and housing and transportation. And all that contributes money to the economy. So this hasn't been studied extensively, but it has been looked at on a statewide level by Samuel Addy, an economist at the University of Alabama. He did a cost-benefit analysis and came up with the conclusion that if a significant number of workers self-deported, then it would result in a net economic loss for the state. Now, as geographers, we're interested in not just what's happening, but how that changes with relation to time, with relation to location and scale. So the question that we asked was, what would the effects of HB 56 be on a county level? How does that change from county to county? Based on what we know about where undocumented immigrants work, the effects wouldn't be evenly distributed around the state. When we started looking at the literature, we found that this actually hadn't been studied at a county level before, so we decided to head in that direction. And so what I'm showing you today is the preliminary results that we're finding from this focus. We do know that before HB 56 passed, there were about 120,000 undocumented immigrants in Alabama, or about 2.5% of the population. 95,000 of these were in the labor force, which comes out to 4.2%. In addition, previous research has shown that undocumented workers are most concentrated in certain industries: agriculture, accommodations, construction, and food. These are recognized as 3 sectors by the North American Industrial Classification System. And the practical result of that is that we can find data for them for each county. So using this information, we calculated the location quotient to figure out how important these sectors were in each county. The location quotient basically compares one region to a larger one based on some characteristic. So in this case, we were comparing the county to the state in terms of employment in these industries that are known to hire more illegal immigrants. Counties with immigrant-heavy industries are in counties where immigrant-heavy industries are more prevalent, we would expect to see a larger impact from legislation that drives some of these immigrants to leave. So here's the first map we came up with to visualize this. We have the location quotients for the construction industry. And you can see up at the top our location quotients range from 0.03 in the lowest class to 4.3 in the highest class. The location quotient of 1 would mean that that industry, construction in this case, is as important at the county level as it is at the state level. LQ of 2 would mean that it's twice as important, and so forth. You can see that the construction industry is most important in counties that have higher populations. We have Jefferson and Shelby County, and we have Baldwin County near the bottom, obviously. And these, of course, it makes sense because you have more people, you have more businesses, there's more things being built. Next, we have accommodations and food, which, as I said before, grouped into one classification. And you'll see this is almost identical to the construction map. So that shows us that these sectors also correlate very closely with population. Now, agriculture tells us a very different story. Instead of seeing it most concentrated in the populated, highly populated areas, we see a band of heavy agricultural land along the coastal plain. What I want to point out here is that our high end of our location quotient is over 20. So these counties in the darkest colored class, that is where agriculture is located for Alabama. It's 20 times more important there than for the state as a whole. That means that if those counties were to lose workers in agriculture, it would have a very strong impact on them, even though for the whole state, agriculture doesn't employ quite as many workers as the other sectors. Now here we have all the maps side by side, so not really anything new here, just a chance for you to see the comparison mainly between construction and accommodations and food service on the one hand and agriculture on the other. So again, the areas in the class that have a high proportion of immigrants also, if you see a darkest class that has the high location quotient and they also have a significant number of illegal immigrants, that's going to be the ones that will be most affected by this legislation. Now this map, I know we got a lot of maps here, but that's what we do, right? This map is showing our estimates for the undocumented population in each county based on the importance of these sectors. And the main takeaway from this is that construction and accommodations and food seem to play a bigger role statewide. However, as we saw before, agriculture is extremely important in certain counties. So that's why we think it's important to look at this at different scales. It makes such a huge difference going from the state level to the county level. Now this map is another way of visualizing this, and it shows the proportion of the population that identifies as Hispanic or Latino. Now, not all undocumented workers are Hispanic, of course. However, a majority are nationwide. And that's not to say that most Hispanics are undocumented. However, most undocumented are Hispanics. So that's an important distinction there. Don't want to generalize too much. But the point of all this is it means that counties that have a very, very low Hispanic population are also less likely to have a large undocumented population. Those counties are shown here in green. And you'll notice that some of them are the heavy agricultural counties, which means not all of those are going to be heavily affected by HB 56. The map on the right, and this is the last map, I promise, guys. The map on the right sort of combines all this data that we've had together. So we have the same information on Hispanic population. What we added to it is the location quotient data. So the counties in red are the ones that not only have a significant Hispanic population, or at least a not insignificant one, but they also have a high prevalence of the industries that we're targeting. So these are the ones where we would expect to see the greatest impact of HB 56. And you'll notice that Calhoun County is among those. Finally, to summarize, we're in the process of studying the county-level consequences of Alabama's immigration law, focusing on 3 sectors: agriculture, construction, and accommodations and food. We're using the location quotient to evaluate the relative importance of each sector by county. And from that, we're working to predict the economic impact overall. Going forward, we'd like to further quantify these economic effects and to relate those findings to social impact. And that's all I've got, so I appreciate you all listening, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to talk about it.